Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Spinning Our Gears podcast. As a reminder to all those Blue Falcons still listening in and following us, suck my... Nope, that's not it. That's for later. As a reminder, the issues, views, and opinions discussed on the podcast are those of the co-hosts and their guests and do not reflect that of any department, agency, city, municipality, state, or country. All stories, characters, and individuals discussed on the podcast should be considered fictional for entertainment value. This show is rated explicit and listener discretion is advised. If you don't like it, don't listen. If you do like it, please like, share, and subscribe. We are on all major platforms and social media, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and of course our website, www.spinningourgears.com. Head on over, check it out, and feel free to contact the guys. Now, without further fanfare and ado, I'm proud to present to you your co-hosts, Turk and Swagger.
Can you bring me a charger?
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Spinning Our Gears. I'm Turk. That guy right there is Swagger. You can't see him, but he's there, I promise. Together, we're just a couple of cops spinning our gears. Swagger, how's it going, buddy?
Going good, man. It's going good. There's a reason why I can't turn the camera on yet, as I'm sure you're aware. We'll talk about it in the near future. So
Are we gonna plug the whole our stories here at some point?
Yep, there's a big win that happened. So we'll get to that point when we can.
It's coming. We promise it's coming. Well, kind of a big episode here. We have our next guest on, and this is the first one that Swagger and I get to be a part of together with a guest. So we want to bring on Erika with Shadows of the Badge. Erika, how's it going?
It's going good, brother. I'm looking forward to getting the word out today about first responder wellness.
Yeah.
The fact that we can and we do recover.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of met through Facebook. It was, I think, an acquaintance of an acquaintance. But can you let everybody know how you found us, how we found you, and where we're at right now?
I'm not 100% certain. The internet is a strange animal. I'm the administrator for Shadows of the Badge. We're a Facebook page that caters to veterans and first responders. There's a lot of inappropriate humor and a lot of facts that are presented, but every now and then I get to slip in information about mental health as well. It's so important. So I can't really tell you how we came across one another. I'm just glad that we did. It's always nice to meet brothers and sisters out there that are getting the word out about our wellness.
Inappropriate jokes and cops, there's no way. I wouldn't believe it 1 second.
I'm shocked myself.
What's that?
I'm shocked myself.
Not like there's this thing called dark humor or anything. So
gallows humor, I'm all over it.
There you go. Gallows humor. It's a better term. A lot better term. Well, Erika, can you give us a little bit of your background and your bio and what got you to where you're at right now with Shadows of the Badge?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the risk of losing every person that is listening right now, I am now a licensed clinical social worker. I went to the dark side. I started out, I'm a 15-year veteran of law enforcement. I was with one police department for the duration of that time in Central Texas. Before I was old enough to wear a badge, I was a jailer for the Bell County Jail in Bell County, Texas, Belton, Texas. And it's just something I had always wanted to do. At 15 years old, I was riding around as a little police explorer. Figured I would take a class or two once I graduated high school in criminal justice and go on to do what I really wanted to do. And the universe had a different plan for me. I took 1 or 2 classes and that was it. I was hooked. So, was with the same agency for 15 years. My first call out of field training ended up being a suicide by officer. I was 21 at the time. I had an older senior officer tell me, that this is a do or die. You're going to make your decision on whether or not you plan on staying in this career. And of course, I decided to stay. I was also one of the first responders to the Luby's massacre. All of that happened when I was 21 years old, and I decided to stay with it. I loved the job. I loved the excitement. I loved the connection with people, helping people out, and I loved getting bad guys off the streets. So I did that, but at about year 12 or 13, things really started to take a toll on me. Didn't have the best of childhoods. So one of the reasons that I was driven into law enforcement to begin with was to make a difference for, other kids that came from broken, dysfunctional homes. And between that and the things that I was experiencing there on the job, you don't talk about it, right? That was the mantra back then. If you can't hang with the big dogs, stay off the porch. Suck it up, Buttercup. You didn't tell people that you were struggling, and of course, I bought into that. And I was also taught, work hard, play hard. After my shooting, the biggest response that I got was, the guys taking me out and getting me drunk. That's how I was kind of taught to deal with things, and so choir practice became a regular part of my routine. When I would come home, though, I had young children at this time. I was married. I'd come home and I'd have a half a glass of wine. And that half a glass turned into a glass, turned into two bottles. And then my thinking at the time was, well, liquor is quicker. So I started drinking whiskey. And that really was my downfall. I know that there was one particular time, my husband at the time was a teacher, and I certainly couldn't come home and explain to him why I was rinsing things off of my boots before walking in the house, and because I didn't want to break his delicate little world and mindset. And but he asked me a question one time. He confronted me one time. He said, "Why is it when you come home, the first thing that you do is you unload your gear, you grab that damn bottle, and you go outside?" And sometimes we say things and they kind of hit you like a truth bomb. And this was
Mhm.
one of those situations. I said, "I'm trying to feel human again." And the problem with that was it was taking more and more for me to feel human. And eventually it got to the point where I needed the alcohol to even function. So at about year 13 out of that 15, I was absolutely a diagnosable alcoholic. 15 years in, my husband had had enough. I ended up losing my kids, my home. I lost everything. Went to the doctor, tried to get help. Was given a medication that was eventually pulled from the market for creating psychosis, so that wasn't very beneficial. And finally got desperate enough. I went to my chief and had to sit down with him. And I said, I'm drinking too much. And I don't know what's going on, but I can't seem to stop this. And I knew when I walked out, my career was over. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. There was no offer for help. There was no, you've been with this department for 15 years and you've been a damn good officer. Let's see what we can do to get this, sorted out. There was nothing. So now I'm unemployed. My career that I had wanted to be a part of since the age of 15 was completely destroyed. And shortly thereafter, I had the first of 7 arrests. Ended up being arrested a total of 7 times, all alcohol related offenses. I hated myself. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I had completely lost my way, and didn't know which way was up or which way was down, and eventually ended up homeless. I lost everything because of this. What I didn't know at the time was I had post traumatic stress disorder. That had never been mentioned. It wasn't a thing. We're talking now 2004. The military was talking about post traumatic stress disorder, but nobody really believed anybody could get it unless, I don't know, they had deployments to the Middle East. And I love the fact that the military was talking about it. What I didn't love was law enforcement still not recognizing this as a legitimate disorder. What I finally came to realize was it doesn't matter how many years in you've been. It doesn't matter how much training you've had. It doesn't matter how much dedication you have to the job. At the end of the day, the one thing that we cannot do is we cannot train the human out of us. And that was the part that was eating my lunch. So completely homeless. March the 10th, 2013, I poured my last drink out on the ground in front of an AA meeting in Killeen, Texas. Called an ambulance on myself. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with 911 dispatchers. I love them to death. They're very no nonsense. She said, 911, what is your emergency? And I said, I'm drunk. And that pissed her off. You could kind of hear it in her voice. She said, man, can you please state the nature of your emergency? And I said, yeah, I'm going to drink until I'm dead. And that seemed to get the ball rolling. So got transported to Scott and White Hospital in Temple, Texas. Spent 3 days in the psych ward because I was suicidal, I was homicidal, and I was most definitely an active and very dangerous alcoholic at that point. Uh, they gave me a telephone number, a list of telephone numbers to call, different treatment programs and such, because I had no place to go at this point. I had burned every bridge. I had family, friends, all of the above with very few exceptions. And about the eighth number down on the list, the lady asked me the same question. She said, "How are you going to pay for this?" And I said, "Lady, I can't. I don't have any money in my bank account. I am absolutely homeless at this point. I have no family. I have no one that can support me financially." And I have to believe at this point that God intervened. There was a very pregnant pause, and I thought, here we go. I'm going to be told once again they cannot help me. And she said, "Look for the white van out front tomorrow when they release you." And there was a white van there. I stayed there for 6 months. I finally got the help that I needed for the PTSD. I gained an understanding of why I had gotten so out of control, and I got my life back. About 18 months into that recovery, I decided to go back to school because I realized that there was a huge gap in the first responder community for getting help. And I thought, I can either sit here and I can spend the rest of my days complaining that help wasn't made readily available to me, or I can get off my ass and I can make damn sure it's made available for someone else. And that's been my passion. That's been my passion for the last 10 years. 18 months in, I went back to school. We're talking 2005, 2006. I had not been in a classroom since 1990. And I had an associate's in criminal justice. So I got my bachelor's degree, decided to keep going with it. At this point, I absolutely knew that I wanted to become a therapist and be the therapist that I had needed for so many years. Somebody that had boots on the ground, that understood the unique problems that come with these professions, and wasn't going to psychoanalyze them right out of my room. That I needed to be able to speak in language that I understood, because why wouldn't I want to afford that to my brothers and sisters? So I eventually got my master's degree in social work. I became a licensed master of social work. And then about a year ago, I passed my licensed clinical social work exam. So to kind of round things up, I have two boys. They were littles when all of this first started. One of them is still very angry with me because his hero fell off her pedestal, and I have to respect and honor that. My youngest son is 22 years old, and I have a pretty good relationship with him today. He comes and hangs out with his old mom every now and then, which is cool. And this is what I do. I specialize in the treatment of veterans and first responders. My practice is at Canyon Lake. Is at Canyon Lake, Texas. It's Windmill Wellness Ranch. I developed a program called the Guardian Initiative, and I've been with them now for about 2 years. I treat the things that other therapists, I'm not saying that they won't treat, but maybe they're not as attuned. Um, Grief, moral injury, trauma, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other stressor and trauma related disorders. And I'm able to speak with them in a way that is translatable. They understand it. I'm not trying to impress them with my, you know, master's level language. That's not what this is about. This is about saving lives. And every brother and sister that has worn that badge absolutely deserves to heal and be able to live a full life. These careers are amazing, but they take a lot out of us.
Well, we're 10 minutes in and you've basically covered 2 years of our podcast.
That is awesome.
You just covered a whole lot, a lot of great stuff. I guess there's so much that I want to cover and I want to talk about with all this, but I think the first thing that you really hit on the head was the drinking issue. And we've talked about it a very little bit on this show, but if those that don't know out there, cops are very bad about addictive personalities. And generally it is alcohol, it's spending too much, and then it's either sex or it's porn addiction.
Yeah.
I guess there is some eating on with that too, but do you think that you talked about how you had that addiction until I think you said 2013? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you think that was from that very first call that you talked about with that suicide by cop, or do you think that it was an accumulation of the 10 years, 15 years on the job?
It was an accumulation, actually, of childhood experiences. That's something that I didn't want to admit. I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a police officer. I had a badge. I had a gun. I was helping other people. And I thought, I've managed to overcome the things that I dealt with as a kid. But I hadn't. I just put a really nice barrier. I had a great facade on the outside, but there was still some of that broken kid on the inside when I first got in.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm perfectly honest, it's like you said, we tend to have very addictive personalities. I was addicted to adrenaline long before I was addicted to alcohol. That adrenaline rush was powerful. And so I kept going after it again and again. And I'm sure that had something to do with me being, one of the officers in my department that was known for being a shit show magnet. If there was something going down, I was usually right smack in the middle of it. And if I wasn't in the middle of it, I was getting there as quickly as I could, because that was a form of addiction for me. I think things started to go a little bit more off the rails when I had the first call out of field training. Went a little bit more off the rails. There's something very dangerous about, hi, you've been involved in a shooting, give us your gun, and by the way, you're going to go home. I went home. At that point, I was a single parent. I had a toddler, and so it was me and my toddler, and that's what I was left to process.
Yeah.
It was the first time the chief had ever really had anything decent to say about me. He came up, slapped me on the back, and I'll never forget him going, "Good job, buddy." And I looked at him. I remember looking back like, now?
Yeah.
You're doing this now?
Yeah.
But I follow procedures. You go and you talk to the shrink, and I lied my ass off. I'd worked too hard to get into this career and I wanted it too badly. Are you having nightmares? No, absolutely not. Are you, having thoughts throughout the day that you don't really want to be having or thinking about? Absolutely not. No. And I lied. I lied over all of it. So of course I cleared and did my shoot, don't shoot in San Antonio, and, back on the job I went.
What is shoot don't shoot?
It was I don't even know what they call it now, so forgive me being an old lady, but back in the day there was a training program, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was a computer generated scenarios.
Okay.
So you
Just
had to
making sure you weren't pulling the trigger when you were supposed to, or
yeah,
vice versa. Yeah.
making sure that I was cleared and safe to go back on the road.
Gotcha. Okay.
Another interesting side trip to my story is I have Tourette's syndrome. So Mike, the Tourette's cop, was not the first one. I just didn't have social media back then. But I also had discovered fairly early on that alcohol kind of cooled my jets with my tics.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was another powerful motivator. But I think things really went off the rails. They were already bad. I definitely would have been diagnosed as an alcoholic, but I just went completely. If I was dancing along the rim of that bottle, I dove headfirst in after I walked out of the chief's office, because again, I knew that my 15-year career was over. I was still hopeless. I was helpless, and now I was going to be careerless, and I was just absolutely heartbroken. I didn't know which way was up. I wasn't making good decisions for myself. And of course, in that same time frame, my husband, at the time, he couldn't deal with it anymore. I hold no animosity toward him. At that point, he took the children and removed them from the home because I had become a danger to myself, and I'd also become a danger to them.
When it comes to talking to your chief, obviously it's been a broken system for a long time. Did he offer you any handout, any help at all, any words of advice, or was it just, okay, I'll take your badge and your gun?
No, he gave me two choices. I was told that I could medically retire,
Mm-hmm.
in which case I was to turn in my badge and my gun that day, or I was going to be terminated, in which case I could turn in my badge and my gun that day. Those were my options. I'm not stupid. I may have been sick, but I took the medical retirement.
It's crazy to me that, well, one, they offered you the medical retirement, because
Right.
now 20 years later or 30 years, or wherever we're at, they almost push away from that. We have taken some steps forward, but it's all very much the same thing. We've harped on this before, of the admin is there and they say, we're here for you, for your problems, for your addictions, for your mental illnesses. Come to us if you have problems. But as soon as you do, and as soon as it becomes a burden on the department, now they're trying to force you out. And for some reason, medical retirement is not on the table, and it's usually harder to get than it ever has been, from what I've seen.
Well, to clarify what my medical retirement was, it's not what you would consider a traditional. I think that's probably the only courtesy that was extended to me, was that my records would not show that I was terminated,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't receive any type of compensation from the city. I had my 401k, and I burned through that in the first year after leaving the department because I was unemployed and
Sure.
to make good decisions for myself. So
During that time,
I have
oh,
a
go
quick
ahead.
question. How long was that process? Did it take? Was it immediately like 24 hours that as soon as you were like medical retirement, they just dropped it? Or because I know like here where we live, it takes quite a long time to go through the medical board stuff.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't think this was a traditional medical retirement.
Okay,
I was told that I could choose medical retirement or I could choose termination. Medical retirement came with no type of benefits. There were no payouts. There were none of that. When I left
sure.
that, what I had on my 401k.
Okay,
So I think that was extended more as a courtesy than anything else. But that's all I got. There was no, let's get you help, or let's they just weren't talking about things like that back then. If you were a police officer struggling with addiction, you were swept under the rug and out the door as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what happened with me.
What about over the next few years when you said you get arrested several times? Was
Yeah.
anyone noticing that this is happening and stepping up and saying, "Hey, Erika, you are one of us. You used to be one of us. How do we help?"
So my first two arrests were by my former department.
Mhm.
Uh, the first time it was actually an officer that I had trained. So I was one of his field training officers. And I'd heard through the grapevine, through some mutual friends, that really screwed him up. In fact, I can remember, I know I've never had blackout drunk, so I remember that stop. And he kept calling me Sarge. Hey, Sarge, you don't really feel like you've had too much to drink to safely operate a motor vehicle, do you? And apparently I can't lie when I'm drunk either. I said, dude, I am fucked up. And of course, the next thing, was, go ahead and step out of the vehicle. I called him the day after and I apologized. Once I made it back home, because I had to go through the same process as everyone else, I had to get bonded out. And I apologized for putting him in that position. It wasn't long after that I entered treatment for the first time. I went to a place called La Hacienda in Ingram, Texas. While I was there, the official divorce papers reached me. I was devastated. I wasn't willing to talk about the things that I had been holding so close to the vest, and I relapsed the day that I discharged that program. Within probably a couple of months of that, I was arrested for the second time, again by my own department. This time I was transported in my old sergeant's car. So if you've never experienced humility before, realizing that you're being transported in the unit that once belonged to you, that you would think that would have been enough to snap me out of this haze that I was in, but it was not. I became the person I hated. I'm in the back of my old unit and I'm screaming and yelling. Why is it every time I come into, and I'll leave the name of the city out of this, but every time I come into the city, I'm getting arrested. And, it was another female officer. What she spoke was the truth. I didn't want to hear it at the time, but she said, Erika, you're an easy arrest. If we see you and you're driving, you're drunk. She was telling the truth. That was 100% accurate. So the second time again, was the former city. One of those two times, I was actually being booked into the area that I had previously booked lots of people into, and the officer got on the phone to let the chief of police know that they had me in custody. And I could hear his voice on the other end of the phone when he said, "Get that bitch out of my building." That broke me. That absolutely broke me. I wasn't expecting special compensation, special treatment. Um, it would have been nice if one person from that department, outside of a couple of friends that I had that knew who I was as a person, could have said, "Man, we see that you're struggling. What can we do to get you some help?" Clearly, I was trying. I ended up going into treatment a total of 4 times. I relapsed immediately upon discharge with treatment center number 1, 2, and 3. Um, One, because I didn't want to talk about some of the things that had been haunting me for so many years. And two, one in particular I can think of, I took one of the therapists for a test drive. And there's a kind of a comical part of this, but I'll never forget sitting in his office. I'm in an inpatient treatment center, and I told him, I said, "Dude, I said, I don't want to share the things that I've dealt with in law enforcement because I don't want to screw other people up." And that was kind of my sick mindset back then, right? That was my way of saying I really don't want to talk about this. And he said, "Well, give me one example." So I thought, okay, well, let's see what you got. So I gave him one case involving an infant and an autopsy, and I won't go any further than that. But I'll never forget him taking his glasses off. He did one of these. I could see, we studied body language, right? This guy's struggling. He didn't know what to say. And finally he responded with, "Well, that's unfortunate." And I thought, that's the last fucking thing I'm going to tell you. We're
Yeah.
done here. So The last place that I was in, they finally got through to me. That if I didn't start talking about these things and getting help for the things that I've been struggling for so many years, that I was going to end up dying from this. And I didn't want to die. The problem is I had forgotten how to live. I had completely forgotten how to live like a normal, functional human being. And I needed the help of other people to get me back to that.
Yeah, I know what the issue is. I don't know what the causation is when it comes to us kind of forgetting about our own. Obviously, when they, well, running joke for us is when you leave a certain department, they say you're dead to them at that point, and it really seems to be the truth because, without giving away too many details, we know someone who got in an incident who used to work at our old department, and
Mhm.
that old department did not reach out to them whatsoever, and that was a situation where they very easily could have died.
Yeah.
We see this same thing, with you, where our former brothers and sisters in blue are suffering. And I think for a lot of the line people, it's easy to kind of forget because we're busy, family. It's always shift home, back and forth. But for some reason, we have not remembered our own. We forget to reach out to them.
You're right. And I want to carry that a little bit further. This is something that I've noticed over the years. I don't do it as much anymore. I know that I did it, especially in the beginning. I wanted to feel that connection, that brotherhood again. So there were times over the years where there were opportunities for me to strike up conversations with active duties. And, hey, I was a police officer for 15 years and such. And I always go, oh, well, that's nice. Um, and if the truth be told, I can remember being just as guilty. I can remember being in law enforcement and some old guy coming up to me and going, "Yeah, I was a police officer for 32 years." And I'd go, "Yeah, okay, that's great, old man. Get out of my way." Basically, I mean, I got to get back to my job. It's great, but I don't want to sit here and relive your glory days with you. But, that's something that every single brother and sister can do that's listening to this podcast. If somebody comes up to you and says they were a police officer for a certain amount of time or they were a firefighter, man, just take the time to acknowledge and just say, "Hey, man, thank you for your service." You don't know that may not be the only opportunity that person has that day to feel good about something they've done in their life. Um, don't be a shit.
And that they
Take
dedicated so much time to.
Absolutely. Take 2 minutes out of your day to say, "Hey man, I'm really, really thankful for your service. Where did you work at? How long were you in?" You don't have to sit there and become friends with them. You don't have to swap spit or telephone numbers. Just, be kind and give them a little bit of time and attention. But that's another one of my passions, right? Is just recognizing and honoring the people that have served before us.
It's
We
I
that for
think
some.
I think we've gotten so socially awkward now, whereas I think maybe 10, 15 years ago it was an issue of us ignoring them, and now it's not us ignoring them, it's just we don't know how to talk anymore because we've got so much technology, and we can
Yeah,
blame COVID and whatever else you want to. But yeah, I had an old timer come up to me looking for directions, and it was a little bit harder because he was hard of hearing too. But then he said, "Yeah, I spent 30 years at a local sheriff's agency," and it was just kind of that pragmatic pause, like you talked about. Well, what do we
yeah.
say now? Like, you're at my car door, and where do we go from here? But you're absolutely right. That idea of remembering those that came before us and honoring them is a huge thing that we need to work on. So
I just, with what I do now, I'm a master's level therapist. I practice out of the state of Texas. And, because I get to work with veterans and first responders, I know that my story is not unique, which is, I think, all the more important for those of us that have a voice to use it and to use it in beneficial ways. I hear the same stories over and over again. And these are people that departments have just, and I'm going to use the word, they just threw away. I get it. There are things that we do that are inexcusable, that absolutely require pulling that badge and even sometimes pulling their ability to ever be in law enforcement again. I get that. I understand it and I respect it. But I think there are other situations where if administration, if brass would be a little more aware of their officers so that when you see an officer struggling, take the time. That's part of your job. Take the time to pull that guy or that girl aside and say, "Hey, what's going on, man? I notice that you're struggling lately. What can we do to help? Do you need an ear? Do you just need to talk? We need to know that we can talk about these things and not have that age-old fear of, well, if I talk about this, I'm going to lose my job." If the truth is, if you're not providing opportunities for those of us that are struggling to talk about it, you're going to lose a fine officer anyway. So why not be proactive, get them the help that they need? One thing that I have noticed that has begun to change in the last several years is more and more departments are now sending their officers to inpatient treatment programs. And as long as they are successfully completing that program and they get the endorsement or the sign off from the therapist, they're putting them back in the game. And that's beautiful because even 6 or 7 years ago, it was still, oh, you're drinking too much. Okay, well let's see what we can do to get you out. We don't want to deal with this. So I am beginning to see some changes, and I think I don't think I know a large part of that is because people like myself, people like you, Officer Daniel, some of the other people that are out there, Michael Sugru, that we're out there and we're using our voices to change that culture. You know, we're always talking about how our citizens are denigrating us and putting us down. What we're not acknowledging is we're killing ourselves from the inside out. The toxicity is on the inside. Yeah, it's coming from the outside too because of the media and certain agendas that are going on right now. But we're killing ourselves from the inside out. And there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for it. There's lots of trainings and seminars and things that you can do to make your department proactive with the mental health of your employees.
And that's part of what I wanted to harp on. Departments are getting better at sending their officers to these trainings, but then the officers get back and it was more like, well, we sent you there, you have a certificate now, so we're good to go. And they're kind of turning that blind eye still. I think your area sounds to be a little bit more proactive with it. From my understanding, I think Dallas PD may have a really good substance abuse program that
They do.
they're really pushing forward on. I would say
Yeah.
here in Iowa, I don't know of any agency in the state that has anything like that. They're a little better with mental health, but when it comes to substance abuse, Swagger, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any agency that really addresses that proactively.
No, you're absolutely correct. I think that's something the state of Iowa really needs to look into, and get moving in the right direction because there's been situations that we've had, people reach out to us that have had drinking problems, I guess you could say, that their agency 100% just pushed them out the door as well. So, and didn't try to help them at all. They just, slapped the band-aid on the problem and was like, we'll hire somebody else. So,
And here's the truth, right? That change is not going to come from the top down. The change is going to come from the bottom up. It's going to take people like you, people like myself, people like the other people that are out there. It takes dialogue. It takes communication. It takes talking about these things and not just, continuing to sweep them under the rug. So I think the louder we are, the more change happens.
I think you're right. However, we can take so many steps forward as soon as an admin sets that tone with an opportunity with a person who has a substance issue or who has a mental health issue and they force them out. That puts us 10 steps back is the problem that we're seeing. And I think the problem that we're really seeing here in Iowa as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, it's a generational issue, right? Things were even stronger, even one or two generations before my time in law enforcement. Things had started to soften just a little bit. But the thing is, if we can educate people now on the ground level, those people eventually become the brass.
Mm-hmm.
Those people eventually become the decision makers. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. That's why I was saying the change is going to have to start from the bottom up.
Right.
Eventually, those people that are able to change their mindset and say, you know what, these people are worth getting help for and getting them solid again to get them back into their roles. Those people eventually become the decision makers, and that's really where we start to see change.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely people talk about the break in the thin blue line. I I don't like to believe in that, but I think if there is that break, it is definitely at the top right now, like you're talking about, where I think they forget that their time is coming also. And I don't mean that as a threat in any way, shape, or form. There's going to be one day where they're going to either quit or retire, and they're going to be just like everyone else without a gun and a badge, and they don't have that in their mindset. They don't have that where my brother and sister is going to be because they've been pushing it off for the past decade or two.
And it's a struggle. I mean, I'm seeing some of those officers, the ones that had put in 20, 30, 40 years. They retire and all they have left is their old duty revolver and their bottle of Jameson. And so it doesn't take long for the wheels to start coming off, and then they end up coming in to see someone like me. And, oftentimes, a good part of their therapy in the beginning is overcoming this old mantra or dogma of we don't talk about our problems. Once I get them talking about the problems and the things that they've dealt with, and, some of them, they're like, well, this happened 30 years ago. Dude, it's trauma. It doesn't matter if it happened 30 minutes ago or 3 minutes ago. Your brain is responding. It doesn't realize time frame. Trauma doesn't realize time frame. So you're getting these guys that have been on the job for 20, 30, 40 years talking about, I don't need help. I don't know why my family, I just like to drink, I'm passing the time. And the family's going, oh no, it's way more than that. This is all he's doing. It takes half of treatment sometimes just to get them to the point where once they start talking, it's beautiful. They're able to start the healing process. But these older generations, I'm having to put in quite a bit of effort in just overcoming the ego and the pride part of it. And I get it because I was the same way, right? Instead, I relapsed 1, 2, and 3 different treatment facilities. It was all ego. You guys can't help me. You couldn't possibly understand me because I'm different.
Well, and you talk about that 30-year career of not talking about it, but then you also kind of mentioned it earlier, the childhood stuff.
Yeah.
Swagger and I have been in law enforcement for a combined almost 20 years, I think, and I just recently heard about ACEs and the childhood trauma that's associated with that. So we do have a long way to go, obviously, but yeah, it's not just the 20, 30-year career, it's all the stuff that came before that as well.
Well, and something that people don't talk about very often, but I think is really important to mention. And I knew this to be the case in my story, but as I began to work with other first responders, I realized just how prevalent this is. I'm not saying that every first responder had a jacked up childhood and lost that deck of cards. That's not what I'm saying. But I am going to say that a good number of us, we end up going into these fields, whether you join the military, you join that branch of service, or you join, the fire department, the police department, whatever that may be. A lot of us end up in those career paths because of childhood experiences. It's not uncommon for us to come from families where there was chaos, there was addiction, there was divorce, there were, multiple trips by, the police department to the home. And so we're drawn into these careers because, one, it gives us a sense of power and control, but it also gives us a conduit to help other people that are coming from, similar circumstances. And I know that was my case. I wanted to help other kids understand they could be more than what they came from. But that's not addressing those issues.
Right.
Right. So then you come into this career where you've got more and more trauma. Now you don't just have a trauma or stress related disorder, you have complex trauma. You have trauma from your childhood, you have trauma from the job. And the idea of just sucking it up, it's killing us. The ones that are trying to suck it up are the ones we end up losing and end up on those damn suicide stats because nobody's out of hand and saying, what can we do to help?
I have another loaded question. Swagger, do you have anything you want to ask real quick before I move on to this next part? I know we covered a lot in the past 15 minutes, and I haven't given you a chance yet.
No, go ahead, because the questions that I had are all being checked off as Erika talks, so we're good there.
Okay.
I mean, you do a good job explaining stuff, and so yeah, we're kind of crossing those off as we go, so we're good.
Okay. So, Erika, the next part I have is you talked about that first therapist you sat down with and how you gave them that test drive and how they completely swung and missed entirely. I hear that over and over and over again. I myself have sat with a therapist, and I knew in the first 30 seconds to a minute, this is not going to work out. Where do we build that bridge is my question.
We built that bridge with people that have had boots on the ground, deciding they want to make a difference. If you would have asked me, 20 years ago, somebody would have said, you're going to be a social worker. I probably would have threw things at them and called them ugly names. Because I have my opinion of social workers just like anybody else. And I have my opinion of shrinks just like anybody else. And here I am. I'm a freaking social worker shrink, whatever. It works. But they walk into my office and I don't have, you know, beautiful floral prints on my wall. If you walk into my session room right now, there are two boards. One board carries the patches of units, military units. The other board carries not just patches, but I've had some badges actually turned over to me over the years. They come in and they know that they're in a good space. I'm using their language. I'm not using, I have no need to impress. That's not my role here. My role here is to help somebody understand that they can trust me with those stories. So I'm very open about my story. I use my story frequently when I'm working with clients, not as a look at what I did, you need to do this too. It's a look, you can go to the bottom of the barrel, you can go as low as you can go with these things, but you can still recover. And I'm walking proof of that. So talking with them, sharing bits and pieces of my own history and my own story with this, I'm able to gain their trust. And then of course at that point, it's my job to maintain and honor the trust that they give me. And once they realize they can do that and that their trust will be honored, they become more comfortable talking about the things they need to talk about. So, to go back to your question, it goes back to we got to keep talking about this. We got to normalize it. We got to make it okay that when somebody is struggling with something that they can go to their supervisor or go to their buddy and say, hey, man, I think I need some help to get myself out of this one because I'm really struggling to do it on my own. And then, um, one of my life mottos at this point is true strength lies in asking for help. True leadership lies in providing the help that's asked for. That's what we have to do.
100%. When you were, how many, it's a two-part question, and I don't want to put too much on the plate, but how many therapists did you see before you found the one that you felt comfortable with? And then the second part is, how many times did you attend that therapist before you felt comfortable laying it out on the line there?
I am doing shrink math right now. I question before, so I want to say between 7 or 8.
Okay.
That includes inpatient and outpatient because I did some outpatient therapy as well. Um, the person who finally got through to me was not a first responder.
Okay.
The first person to get through to me was a 3-time convicted felon who runs a homeless women's shelter in Temple, Texas. And so I was telling her that there's no way in hell I was going to work with her. I wasn't talking to her. Hell, a few years ago, I'd have been arresting her. Or she came back with, yeah, only if you could catch me. And I laughed and she laughed. And that's where the healing began. I realized that I was not as unique as I thought I was, that you didn't have to be a police officer to understand what I was going through. But at the same time, I needed somebody that was willing to understand what I had been going through. And she was that for me. I also have a sponsor. I am a bona fide member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am not ashamed of that. I'm actually very proud of that. I've had the same sponsor for 10 years and he cuts me no damn slack. He
Good.
cuts through my bullshit like, dude, Scott, I've actually told him, man, you missed your calling. Like you should have been a detective or a shrink because you're amazing at what you do. But he holds my feet to the fire when I need it. My thinking still goes off the rails every now and then. I need that accountability, and that's something I never wanted to admit before. But I'm grateful for that accountability today because he can hear miniature relapses in my mind when I start getting angry or anxious about something, and he catches that before I do, and he can turn it around. So I'm grateful for that.
Our career field is one of the few where I think bluntness is paramount when it comes to this type of stuff. The point that I was trying to make, I guess, was we keep hearing it over and over again where people will go to one therapist, it doesn't work out, and then they're done. They won't go back for 6 months, 6 years, 20 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Just because you sit down with someone and it doesn't work out the first time doesn't mean there's not someone else out there for you to talk to.
Yeah.
Swagger and I had the unique setup, I guess it was, where we had a dispatcher who was going through classes to be a psychiatrist. So we had that like kind of behind the scenes. It was someone who was a first responder, but just because the first one doesn't work out doesn't mean there's not someone out there for you.
So I love that you brought that up. There's an analogy that I use even with clients that I'm working with because when they finish by the time they finish my program, the one at Windmill Wellness Ranch, they have aftercare appointments set up. They're going to have aftercare appointments set up for outpatient therapy. They're going to have an appointment set up with their primary healthcare physician to get themselves checked out medically, physically. Sometimes there are appointments set up with psychiatrists. It just depends on the diagnoses. And we have a whole lineup of meetings, whether they're going to do AA, NA, they're going to do it's another type of program of recovery called Smart Recovery. We have all of those things in place. And one of the things that I tell them, I'm going to recommend, clearly, I don't know therapists all over the United States. So there are databases that I use. And I always tell them, look, this is a referral. This person seems to have, based on their profile, have what you need. I try to find them first responders that do have a I'm sorry, therapists that do have a first responder background, but that's not always possible. So I tell them, you shop for underwear, right? You price compare. You want to make sure that that's the right fit, that it's not going to be cutting into your waistline. It's not going to be letting certain things dangle. You know, we put all of this effort. So if you're going to put that much effort into shopping for a pair of underwear, for God's sakes, put the same amount, if not more effort into shopping for your therapist. I'm not everybody's fit. I don't know if you can tell. I'm sure you probably can. I'm very blunt. I'm very direct. That doesn't resonate with everyone. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. So there have been some times over the years where somebody had a veteran or first responder background and they went, ooh, this one goes to Erika. And the first couple of sessions, they're up at the front office going, I'm not going to be able to work with her because I'm just not their cup of tea. And that's fine. It doesn't break my heart. I want them to get the help that they need. And I want them to be able to build that connection with whatever therapist, they end up being assigned to. But Jesus Christ, man, shop around. This is your life. This is your mental health. And if your mental health is off, you're off, your family's off. This isn't just something that affects us. It affects our loved ones as well. So if you go to one appointment and you're thinking, I'm not connecting with this person, the first thing I'm going to suggest is let that person know. Have that conversation with them. Hey, you know what? I'm really not comfortable working with you. Um, because sometimes that can provide some valuable insight. I've had clients before that are like, I don't really like working with you. And so I ask questions. And the deeper issue, honestly, may end up being I remind them of their mom, especially the younger ones, because I'm in my 50s now. So, and I'm very blunt and direct. So sometimes there's this idea of transference, countertransference. I remind them of someone from their past. Sometimes we're able to overcome that. It works out really well. It actually gives me more insight into who they are and what they're struggling with. But if you're just not feeling it with that therapist, don't just throw your hands up. They're just like human beings, right? We are human. We all are different. You may have one that wants to do, Tibetan singing bowls and Buddhist mantras. And then you have somebody like me that's going, if you don't show up to your session tomorrow, I'm going to kick your ass. that, that actually happened at one of my last treatment centers. I got called in by the clinical director. Did you threaten to click that? And it was somebody that I had a really good therapeutic relationship with, but he was telling other clients, man, Erika said she's going to kick my ass if I didn't show up to another one of her sessions. And he was laughing about it. But the clinical director didn't have the same sense of humor, so I got called on the carpet. You say this? And I said, I absolutely did.
And I absolutely will, too, on top of that.
Yeah.
About that the entire time he was there. He's like, man, if you get Erika, don't screw with her because she's going to tell you how it is. And so, yeah. But, it could have went the other way. He could have been like, you know what, I don't want to work with you. And okay, well, let's get you with somebody that you are going to be comfortable with. So don't give up. If you meet with that first therapist and you don't feel like things are jiving, keep trying. You'll eventually find the right fit.
Yeah, stop being such a cop. Stop looking for that immediate gratification. We can't buy our way out of this. We can't drink our way out of this. It's going to take
No,
time and it's going to take effort. So
yeah,
let's.
absolutely.
I want to know so much about the windmill wellness area. I think I was trying to do some research on the website and I couldn't. If I was to give you an intro, I wouldn't know how to put it all into one. So, kind of give us a synopsis and an overview of what this the Windmill Wellness Ranch is all about.
So, Windmill Wellness Ranch, I want to tell you this first of all. I've been at other treatment centers. This is not the only treatment center that I practiced in, but it is the one that I'm willing to drive 3 hours a day to get back and forth to. I live about an hour and a half away from where I work.
Okay.
Don't do that because I don't have any other place to go. I do that because I absolutely believe in the program at Windmill Wellness Ranch. We're located in the Texas Hill Country. Absolutely beautiful scenery out there. If you've never been to the Texas Hill Country, you're missing out. It's absolutely gorgeous. Take cedar medication, though. We do have cedar trees out in that area if you're allergic to cedar. We have something called NET, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on, but it's a very specific type of chiropractor service. We have a chiropractor on site. I'll give you just the tiniest. I've actually done most of these myself. Because if I'm going to recommend it for a client, I want to know what it's all about. I won't go into the details, but the guy didn't know anything about my story other than I was a fellow employee at Windmill. He grabbed my wrist and about 2 minutes in, he went, "What happened when you were 14 years old?" And I almost fell out of my chair. because that's nothing that anybody up there knew about. So it's an amazing thing. The other thing that we use is brain frequency. We are a one of a kind. It is not offered anywhere else in the world the way that we do it. And I've done 20 of those treatments myself. At about treatment 10, I started to notice changes in how I was experiencing anxiety, depression, and my thinking started becoming more clear. They use EEGs, so you get these beautiful printouts that show how much function any particular part of your brain is pushing out. And a couple of those areas, I was squeaking along at about 30%. And after 20 of those treatments, I was up to 85. So, it's not just me seeing it, the graph on paper, like I was actually experiencing the differences. The other thing that we use is something called Track 9. Track 9 is an independent company. They are not affiliated with Windmill as far as like a business type thing. Track 9 is used by Betty Ford. It's used by some really large treat. We're the number one treatment facility in the country according to Track 9. This is an independent audit. And I'll toot my own horn for a minute because of the type of work that I do and the way that I do it. I was the therapist of the year for the nation earlier this year for outcomes in the first 4 weeks.
Hell yeah.
So large part of that is because I'm able to build that trust, because they can't just go, you're never going to understand this. Chances are I probably do, because I've lived it myself. So that translates very well in session. I get to watch my brothers and sisters come in absolutely broken, defeated. They're in the same place that I was 10 years ago. And I'm able to look at them and recognize what brought them to that point. I help them work through the things that have brought them to that point. And then I get to see the light start turning on in their eyes the same way I got to see the light turn on in mine. And I would do this shit for free. There's something beautiful in watching a brother or sister go from completely broken, destroyed, to interacting with their peers, actually helping the newer ones that are coming on site, helping them to understand that, you know, if they'll put everything that they have into the program, that they also can get well. And I, I'm very lucky, I suppose. I've actually had two, three three clients that I've worked with over the years have actually come back in a way that I've actually worked with them. And I don't want to go into too much because I don't want to violate confidentiality, but basically I've had former clients come back and now they're doing the
Nice.
same things that I'm doing, maybe just in a little bit different capacity. So, and I get to work with one of those individuals at Windmill. So it's really neat to see that.
And you guys cover the gamut from addiction to PTSD and everything in between for first responders,
Everything.
right?
Treat any mental health diagnosis that's out there. We will treat. We're unique in that way. A lot of substance or addiction treatment facilities are primarily addiction.
Mhm.
We also have a mental health track. So if you're not struggling with addiction, but you're struggling with the demons, we're not going to turn you away because you haven't turned into a raging alcoholic. We're going to get you in and get you the help you need before that happens.
And you guys have, it's basically a retreat, right? How many acres is this land?
Don't get me to lying. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's in the hundreds, but that's
Yeah.
all I can.
I,
It's a good size. We have plenty of walking trails. We have a beautiful pool out there that the clients are able to access. We have a phenomenal gym. So we truly do understand that this isn't just about mental health. Recovery is a three-pronged approach. It's mental, it's physical, and it's spiritual. I know with my story, by the time all of this was done, as I'm living out on the streets because I have no other place to go, I absolutely was pissed off at God. I was angry. I would tell you that I didn't believe in him in the same breath that I would tell you I was angry at him. And so part of my recovery has been reconnecting with a belief system that I can buy into, that I'm comfortable with. And recovery taught me how to do that. So we work on the spiritual aspect. If somebody doesn't want to work on the spiritual aspect, I don't have a problem with this, or I don't believe in God, I'm agnostic, I'm atheist, then we have a program called Smart Recovery that doesn't involve higher power at all, but provides you with real world tools that you can use to work on your mental health or addiction.
it's definitely not a lockdown type facility. It is a it's a whole body, whole mind type thing. And just looking at some of the pictures that I saw, it looks very much like it's obviously not a vacation. You're working on yourself, but it looks more like a vacation than it is a treatment facility.
Yeah, I mean, if we were just all work, all programming all day long, we would lose people. And here's the other thing. I mean, something that some treatment centers, I don't think take into account. I know that Windmill does, is also this idea of self care. Learning how to take care. We're the helpers, right? We don't like being the helpees, but we can't pour from an empty cup, and we're not really. It's not really self care. Is really not stressed.
Yeah.
In these different fields. So the recovery aspect of Windmill, we stress the practice of self-care. Like, you've got to take care of yourself. If you want to keep taking care of other people, and you have the capacity to do that, that's amazing. And make sure that you're taking care of yourself first.
Very, very cool. I like it a lot. I think it looks awesome. I wish it was closer, obviously. My next question. Oh, what's that?
Flights are cheap right now.
Maybe Swagger and I'll have to do an on-site live recording or something like that. So
I really would. I'd really like to get you guys in touch with Shannon Malish. She's our CEO, and I never thought I would have nice things to say about a CEO of a company. She's amazing. She has her own story. She's in recovery herself. Her husband just retired out of law enforcement, so he's a blue line brother.
Okay.
And they literally, she had been a therapist for many years. She'd always had a passion for veterans and first responders, but all of these places that she was going, she was seeing the same things that I was seeing. She was seeing things that she just didn't agree with. And so she went to her husband, Chris Malish, and said, look, I want to open a treatment center. And I'm sure that was an interesting conversation. I would love to have been a fly on the wall. They took 10 credit cards out in their own names, maxed them out to get this place opened originally several years ago. Their passion for treating veterans and first responders is above and beyond any other place I've ever associated myself with. They truly care about each individual that comes through.
That's incredible. That's very, very cool.
That's just awesome.
Explain to me a little bit how the Facebook page took off. When did that start? What was the idea behind that? How did it kind of to mesh into the Windmill Wellness?
Yeah, so Shadows of the Badge was actually started by a very good friend of mine. In fact, he was one of my brothers that stuck by me through all of this. He never turned his head. Um, he was always there for me. He knew that I was a good person, and I was a human being having a human experience. So he's the one who originally started the page. He reached out to me very early in my recovery because I already knew, like, I was already talking to him and some other people. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like yet, but I got to do something to start helping with the changes. And he offered me the opportunity to just, add some posts every now and then to Shadows of the Badge. And I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity. And things just kind of grew from there. Eventually, he kind of took a back seat to the page and let me take over in the driver's seat. So I use Shadows of the Badge. I use it, like I said, kind of at the beginning of this. I use it to tell really horrible jokes that are not fit for public consumption. I use it to, I'm always asking for prayer warriors. So I belong to a lot of different sites. So when I see that an officer is struggling, they're in the hospital, they've been shot, they've been in an accident, whatever that is, I ask for prayer warriors to join in because I do believe in the power of prayer. Um, I also post information that I think is important for people to know as far as like new laws that come into effect and what I call fuckery. That's when the liberal legions manage to accomplish whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. I know that it's going to be detrimental. But then I also put posts up about mental health. And that's one thing that I'm seeing more and more on some of these other pages that I belong to, but I'd like to see more of it. You got to kind of balance it out. If all I do is mental health stuff, I'm going to lose the people that are interested. I don't care about numbers. I don't care if Shadows of the Badge has 5 followers or it has 50,000 followers. I give 2 shits less. I've never given Facebook a penny. I will not ever give Facebook a penny. They've done everything from try to shadow ban me to shutting me down, and I've always come back and fought. Um, because I know that I have followers on that page. They've messaged me before, like, you're the only person I feel like understands what I'm going through. I've had them reach out and go, hey, I need help. Can you get me connected? That's happened more than once. In fact, more than once, somebody that followed Shadows ended up coming into wherever I was practicing, and I ended up being their therapist. So for that, I will keep that page going.
Yeah, Swagger, do you want to talk about Facebook pages getting taken?
Yeah, let me tell you.
We're on number 2 there. So I
The
think,
bad.
yeah, I think if you are a fan of poorly made police memes, but then you're also a fan of any like uh, David Goggins or anything like that, Shadows of the Badge is kind of a great combination of both of those. It's almost kind of like police memes with a purpose, I guess is what I would call it. But I love the page. It's always good to look into every day. I think you guys post several times a day, but it's a good little
Mhm.
pick me up, especially if you're just kind of in that little gray area where you need something to get you out of it. So
Absolutely.
I gotta say, it's been an awesome conversation. Just like all the good interviews go, it's already been an hour. We're into this thing. I feel like there's 4 more hours that we can go into with stuff here, but I think we got to have to kind of digest this and let the fans digest what we've covered so far. What I will say, Erika, is you are absolutely welcome on this podcast anytime you'd like. Sounds like you want to get your
Absolutely.
CEO on. They're welcome anytime also. So, Swagger,
Absolutely. I'll have her reach out, or I'll reach out to you guys and give you guys your contact information.
right on. Swagger, is there any questions you want to ask before we cut this off?
No, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I know I hope our group, our core people that listen, can share this episode and get the word out there that there are places out there. There are, prior law enforcement, prior veterans that have made the transition into being a therapist that you can talk to. I think that is very important, like we've discussed today. So, but I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking with us.
Been my absolute pleasure. I'll do it anytime. Anytime you guys want to, or have the ability to give me a little bit of time and space. So like I said, this is a passion for me, and I'll come back as many times as you guys invite me, and I'll tell the story as many times as I need to reach the ears who need to hear it.
How can our fans reach out to you?
They can reach out to me directly through Shadows of the Badge, is one way to do it. They can private message me. The other option that they have is to call up at Canyon Lake to Windmill Wellness Ranch. And this sounds terrible, but I don't ever call my own place of employment. So I'm going to see if I can get my computer to cooperate, and I'll give you the telephone number. So bear with me for just
Sounds
one
good.
moment. That's terrible, right? I don't know my own telephone number, but let's see what we can do with this here real quick.
If I didn't have my business card on me at work, I wouldn't know my own phone number, so it's okay.
There you go. Like I don't feel bad now. All right, let's see if I can get this telephone number for you. So the number that you can contact, it'll reach up to the front office, is 830. Man, getting old sucks. Let's see, I can't read this number. 830-468-9851. And I'm going to double check that real quick because I'm looking that up on my phone and I can't see it. Y'all don't laugh at me. I'm 53. I'm old. I can't see it. Pretty sure that's what it is. 830. There we go. Yep. Where's it at? 830. Oh, there's another number. 830-935-2805. That's a good one.
Okay.
Sounds good.
But I will
And
say that the Shadows of the Badge, she has had no issues and reached out very quickly if I've ever messaged her. So Shadows of the Badge on Facebook will get directly to her. She has I can't think of the word. She has one of those automated messages like we do. It'll usually
yeah,
pop up as soon as you message, but just like us, she'll get to you pretty quickly. So,
absolutely.
Swagger, what's your closing remarks, buddy?
I got nothing else. Just a quick question. Is there anything other than Facebook? Do you have Twitter or any other social media network platforms that you got going? Just just Facebook or anything else?
I do not. I tried one of the other platforms, but I realized that between what I do, as it's not uncommon for me to work 14 or 15 hours a day and running
Sure.
Shadows Badge, it was just so nope, just Shadows. Or
All right.
you can actually pull up if you'll go online and Google windmillwellnessranch.com. It will take you directly to our site where you can look at the property. You can look at the different programs that we offer. We have podcasts that we put out as well. And you can also look up the information that we have that is specific for first responders. There are a couple of other therapists on site, one in particular that I trained personally at another treatment facility that I was operating out of a couple of years ago. But chances are, if they're a veteran or first responder, the first person they're going to come to is me.
Right on.
Sounds
Right
good.
on. Well, Erika, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to talk to us. I want to thank you for an awesome episode. I think everything you hit on was great. Swagger, I want to thank you for tuning in as well, buddy. It's always good to talk to you. Otherwise, to everyone else out there, stay safe, and we'll get this together.
Absolutely. Stay vigilant. Thank you, brothers. Have a good afternoon.
You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.